Did I just talk and nobody heard? Well, now it's 6:32, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. Now we'll read the suggested disclosure. In accordance with Governor Sununu's Emergency Order Number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. Information and connection links to the meeting are provided on the Town of Plymouth website at plymouth-nh.org. I'll now do a roll call of planning board members. Please signify your presence when I call your name. Phil?
Here.
It's hard with all the postage stamp faces. I can't see everybody as well as we normally can. John?
Present.
Marianne?
Here.
Steve?
Here.
Carl?
Here.
Mark?
Here.
And me, Rebecca, I am here as well. We have a full board tonight. That is great. So we got a lot of participants. So we do have a couple public hearings on the agenda this evening. We will start with, since we have so many people here to participate in, I'm assuming for the zoning ordinance public hearing, we'll start with that. I would just ask that everybody that's here to keep yourself on mute just to avoid background noise. And we will get to the public hearing section. And when we open up the public hearing, I will just ask folks that wish to speak to raise their hand, and I will do my best to call on them and give them a short amount of time to speak. First, if the board agrees, I'd like to just start with introducing the zoning ordinance changes that we're proposing. Does that work for board members?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I think I've done this a lot. So hopefully I'll have this smooth for everybody. But back in 2018, we completed the update process for the Plymouth Master Plan. The Master Plan is kind of the heart and soul of the land use planning in the town of Plymouth, and all towns in New Hampshire are required to have them. It's not a regulatory document, but it does set the spirit behind our zoning ordinance, which is the regulatory guiding document that we use here on the planning board. So the master plan involves a ton of opportunities for the public to engage in the planning process. There was a survey that was distributed to residents and voters, or landowners and voters. We had 4 or 5 engagement sessions, I can't remember, where we had a number of people that were able to participate, in addition to a number of hearings and work sessions throughout, I think, the 2-year process we were working on that were open to the public. So what we learned is that in Plymouth, we love our rural areas and we love our downtown. We like the economic opportunities we have. We like our recreation opportunities. So we're really looking as a planning board to maintain both that rural nature and economic opportunities in the town of Plymouth. All of this background documentation on the master plan is available on the town's website. I think the survey results are there as well. It's really interesting stuff. So anyway, the master plan is what is guiding these changes for the zoning ordinance. So what we've been working on implementation for 2 years now. So we've been going through this list of recommendations that came out of the master plan, and a number of them were involved our zoning ordinance. So looking at making areas that are appropriate for development, which were identified in the master plan, making sure that our zoning ordinance reflected that development, that we have regulations that allow for certain types of development. And also making sure that those areas that were identified by our residents, our neighbors, our friends, that these rural areas are important, so making sure that we're protecting the rural nature of the town. So the changes that we've proposed, and you'll have to kind of visualize this in your mind. You can maybe pull up the maps. They're a little hard to see on a small screen, but so the first change is involving what's in the Tenny Mountain Highway area. Right now, it's what is the ICD, the Industrial Commercial Zone or District. We're proposing changing that to a Tenny Mountain Highway Mixed Use District and extending it to the north side of Tenny Mountain Highway all the way to Millbrook. Right now, it's just market basket is an agricultural zone, just to get an idea of the type of uses that are permitted within the ag zone. So we're proposing, since Tenny Mountain Highway was identified as an area that is appropriate for growth and development, it is certainly an economic hub in the region. So we're proposing that we extend that Tenny Mountain Highway mixed-use district to 500 feet north of Tenny Mountain Highway to Millbrook, which drains under Tenny Mountain Highway just east of Yetton Road. Then we're also proposing a new district, which will partly be carved out of the agricultural zone, but also change the highway commercial district, which is north of the downtown area on Route 3. Then we're also proposing that it extends from where the Tenny Mountain Highway mixed-use district ends on Tenny Mountain Highway and extend it to 500 feet on either side of Route 3A and 25 until the Rumney line to the north, and then the 500 feet south of the Tenny Mountain ski area entrance. And then the same district, which we're calling the Gateway District, is 500 feet on either side of Route 3 south of the downtown area, extended to, this is anything that is currently zoned as agriculture, all the way to the Bridgewater town line. This area was identified in the master plan as being also important for, areas where people are entering the town, maybe a little more appropriate for development than some of our non-state highway routes in town. I'm going to put either Steve or Phil on the spot, since we are all on part of the zoning subcommittee, to talk specifically in a second about the different uses that are allowed and the specific changes to the zoning ordinance. Either of you guys get to do that in just a moment after I introduce the rural zone. Is that okay? All right. And then finally, the remaining agricultural zone. I just want to remind folks that it's the ag zone in name only. It doesn't, just because it's called the agricultural zone doesn't mean that it's intended to be just for agriculture. A good portion, most of our town is in what's currently known as the agricultural zone. So we're proposing a change in name to that, to call it the rural zone, to better capture the uses that are happening there. All right, so Steve or Phil, if you guys want to talk about the dimensional standards and then any of the uses. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
I think you were so excited to share the districts that when you described that, no, just so I don't want to make anyone confused that's here. When you talked about the ICD, the Tenny Mountain Highway Zone, you referred to Millbrook, but we're talking about extending the district from Tenny Mountain Highway to the Baker River.
Okay, and on the other, yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
So I see Mr. McGinley's on with Kevin. So like back behind the market basket to the Baker River, and then following the Baker River to where it intersects with Tenny Mountain Highway to the east.
Yeah, thank you.
That area that's have development that's already happened, development that's been approved, that was within the agricultural zone and has all the infrastructure. We felt to clarify it for the future to put it within that district.
Thank you.
Steve, did you want to talk about uses, or did you want me to run through that?
I think you should do it.
I'll be happy to. All right, I've got the document open here. So we have a brief summary, and what I'll do is I'll go kind of zone by zone and describe the changes in use. I'm not going to go through every permitted use or prohibited use. I'm only going to highlight the ones that are going to be different than what's there now. So starting with the zone that's currently our industrial commercial, that's going to become the Tenny Mountain Highway mixed use. As both Rebecca and Steve mentioned, it's going to be increasing in area a little bit to the north of Tenny Mountain Highway, to the east and to the west a little bit. The minimum lot size is going to change. Currently, the ICD is minimum lot size is between 1/2 and 1 acre, depending on sewerage. And we're proposing changing that to a minimum of 1 acre lot size, regardless of access to sewer. The road frontage for lots in that zone will increase from 100 feet to 150 feet. The setbacks will stay the same. The only major changes in use in that zone are going to be that Institutional uses were permitted by special exception. We're going to allow them without special exception. Civic uses also permitted without special exception. And the other change that we're proposing in that zone is that first floor residential would be permitted by a conditional use permit. So if you're not familiar with the various types of permits and exceptions to the zoning ordinance, there are generally three ways that you can get a variance, or you can get a special exception or variance from the ZBA. But if something is permitted by a conditional use permit, it means that the planning board can grant that, and a separate meeting is generally not required. So we've tried to be forward thinking in granting the planning board the ability to approve those if they meet criteria similar to what a special exception would require, but without having to go to the ZBA. So moving on, the zone that's currently the agricultural zone will be renamed as the rural zone. Where there's currently a 1 acre minimum lot size, we are proposing to increase that to a 3 acre minimum lot size. The allowed percentage of impervious coverage is going to decrease from 75% to 25%, but with an increasing lot size, it's roughly, it's a small reduction in area at that point. The road frontage is proposed to change from 100 feet to 200 feet. The front setbacks are going to increase from 30 feet to 50 feet, and the side and rear setbacks are going to increase from 15 feet to 25 feet. The changes in permitted uses are going to be that lodging is going to be by conditional use permit. Professional services and offices would also be via conditional use permit. Restaurants would be via conditional use permit. Industrial would not be permitted. Retail would be permitted by conditional use permit, and institutional would be permitted. So keep in mind, the zoning ordinance sets the ideal, but any of these uses are eligible for waiving through the ZBA if anybody has a real issue. So again, these are guidelines that we're talking about in ideals. So moving on, areas that are currently agricultural that will become gateway district. So these are the areas that are along Route 3 south to the Bridgewater town line, and basically the area around the traffic circle on the west end of town down to Tenny Mountain Highway, that area, anything west of the Tenny Mountain Highway mixed use district along 25 or the Mayhew Turnpike are going to be in the new, what we're calling the gateway district. So minimum lot size changes from 1 acre to 2 acre. The impervious coverage drops from 75% to 50%, but with a larger minimum lot size. Again, that area stays roughly the same. There's a 35-foot max structure height, which it's hard to find many buildings in town that are higher than that anyway. The lot frontage will increase from 100 feet to 150 feet. The setbacks, the front setback stays at 30, but the side and rear setbacks increase to 25. Changes in permitted uses. There would be addition of the industrial use. So areas that are along those, while we're removing industrial use from most of the rural district, which was agricultural, the areas that are now agricultural but are becoming gateway would be eligible for industrial use permitted with a conditional use permit. And civic and institutional uses would be permitted as well. The current highway commercial, which was kind of the seed idea for the gateway district, we did modify that slightly to the current gateway district standard. So the area that's currently highway commercial, which is in the northeast corner of town, is also going to be gateway district. That area changes minimum lot size from again, 0.5 to 1 acre, depending on sewerage, to 2. The impervious, the maximum impervious area on the lot is changing from 75% to 50%. There's also a 35-foot max structure height. The road frontage changes from 100 feet to 150 feet. The front setback stays at 30, but again, the side and rear setbacks change from 15 to 25. Industrial uses, again, are permitted by a conditional use permit as opposed to a special exception, which keeps everything in-house with the planning board and allows for a more expedited process. So I believe that is the summary of changes to the zones. So I will hand it back over to Rebecca at this point.
Thank you, Phil. All right, so we have a number of people here this evening. I'm really glad to see so many faces that are interested in participating in this process. We've been trying to get people to work with us. We've been working on this for about 2 years now, and we haven't seen a lot of participation, so I'm really glad to see so many people are interested. I think I'll open up the public hearing in a minute here. I also want to acknowledge that this isn't the easiest for a lot of people to participate, so thank you for joining us in this format. But in light of how we're doing this on Zoom, I think it's probably easiest if folks raise their hand. If they have comments, I'll give each person 3 minutes. So when I call your name, you have 3 minutes to speak. And just make sure you say your name and where you live in Plymouth if you're a resident. And then once everyone has a chance to speak, if we still have time and folks still have things to say, then we can go back through and give people an opportunity to make another round of comments. So also questions as well. So it is 6:49 and I am opening up the public hearing for proposed zoning changes. Mike Ahern.
Thank you, Rebecca. So I want to give everybody a little bit of history of the agricultural zone. First of all, I landed in Plymouth full-time in 1987, and that was my first introduction into town politics, what happens in a town. And my dad and Dean Yetton and Paul Reese were very involved with preserving and maintaining the agricultural zone the way that it was. 5 years down the road, they did the same thing with proposed changes to the ag zone. And then in 2012, at the 12th hour, we found out that there were changes being proposed again to the ag zone. So my Dean Yetton and myself and my cousins, Bruce and Henry, formed a small meeting with about 4 people. And we talked about these changes and how it was going to impact us. The next meeting, I believe we had 20 or 22 people. The next meeting was, I believe, at a town hearing, and I think there were 42 or more in attendance. And the planning board was receptive to us, and all we said was we want a spot at the table to discuss changes that were going to happen within the ag zone, our zone that we lived in. They agreed to have a meeting, and Judge Kent remembers this meeting very well. We had over 250 people in attendance because they knew they weren't going to have enough room at the town hall. And at that meeting, we pled our case, and it was very evident that the people that lived in the ag zone were very much in favor of leaving the ag zone as is with no changes. And one thing that we sat with the planning board, myself, Rhonda Bishop, a few others, John Kelly, and we sat with the planning board, and I chaired that because at the time I got onto the planning board, and we did the implementation process. We helped put it together. It was a very simple master plan, very simple process, and we were very thankful to the planning board to allow that to happen, to let us have a seat at the table before it got to the hearing stage. 5 or 6 years ago, as chairman of the planning board, there was talk about making changes to the ag zone, and I held up a map that Kevin French produced for us 12 years ago, where everybody pledged money to defend the agricultural zone, but also pledged their acreage. We had, and I don't know, maybe I'm exaggerating it, 90% of the ag zone were people that were against changes to the ag zone, but it must have been pretty close. Kevin will be able to tell you, but it was also a very substantial portion of the town acreage that was all pledged towards this effort. And I hope I'm not going too long, but when you step out of your car, if you're on Route 3 by my farm or anywhere near it, and you step out of your car and you look around, it doesn't take very long for you to realize there's just a little tiny postage stamp up by the road. Then there's a very steep embankment along that whole area, and then you get to the farmland. And the old timers back in the day, when they came up with the zoning, you see a lot of half-acre lots, small lots. And that was because there was a simple reason for that. It wasn't 3 acres. It wasn't 2 acres. It was very small lots, because when a farmer got into trouble back in the day and he would sell off a lot, he wanted to maintain the farmland behind that home on the floodplain, on the interval. And that's why it was designed that way. Keep the farming intact. If there's a house that sells, let it be the house. I went out west on a trip to Wyoming, and you saw these little houses dotted every 100 or so acres. That house was not part of a farm.
Hey, Mike, I'm gonna stop you there. We're over 3 minutes, but we'll come back to you if you've got a second. So
Okay.
I'll
Thank
take up
you.
some extra time. Thank you. All right. Who is next? Let's see. Sorry, can you put your hand up again? I see Joanne Magnan. That's the hand I see there.
Yes. Her husband, Mike Weaver. We live in the proposed area for the gateway zone between Tenny Mountain and the traffic circle. And a few questions. One, between Yetton Road down to the traffic circle, back to Yetton Road, there is no infrastructure for water or for sewer. And with the concern with water lately, if people start drilling wells in those areas, we're going to run into some trouble by not having wells because of the use. And also, if there's no sewer, some of the wetlands and some of the stuff in there are going to be affected. The other thing is, one of the things that the planning board is supposed to be working on is wildlife corridors. If you shut off that gateway area and around and down, you're taking off more area that has to do with wildlife travel. And I've seen nothing to replace it, or where, how the wild animals in our area are going to move. I see that this gateway is going to prevent that from happening. The third thing is, if you drive down Route 3A, starting the traffic circle toward Bristol, it's a huge hodgepodge of businesses. And I don't know how you're going to make Route 3A look like a gateway road the way things are right now, because I would assume that everyone is going to be grandfathered in that's already here. And I have not been too impressed with how zoning has been enforced. So those things concern me greatly. And that's what I, feel about that being a gateway. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, did you have a comment to address that?
I didn't want to, I appreciate Mr. Weaver's comments and Mike's comments. I just wanted everyone who's here to see this is kind of what the planning board's trying to balance. I think you're both making really good comments that are informing the decision, but this kind of just highlights how hard it is as a planning board to think about when you're making changes to the town to guide development and conservation and recreation and get taxes. You've both done a nice job kind of showing that we're trying to balance all these factors. That was my only comment, Rebecca. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Bruce Ahern.
Yeah, I was just wondering, when you folks were looking at these districts, did you go through the tax map and determine how many conforming and non-conforming lots you have now in these districts, and how many you're going to end up with if you make the changes that you are proposing? Because I looked at the area that I'm familiar with, from the Bridgewater town line to the town of Plymouth, presently there are 21 non-conforming lots between the Bridgewater line and the town of Plymouth. If the new regulations go into effect, there are going to be an additional 16 non-conforming lots for a total of 37 non-conforming lots. And I count only 29 conforming lots. And to me, it seems a little bit ridiculous to end up with a district with more non-conforming lots than conforming lots. So it's something that you need to look at in each one of these districts as to what is there now, what's conforming, what's non-conforming, and base your changes on that, not just arbitrarily saying that we want to have this gateway district, let's put these dimensions on it. When the statement was made that there are very few buildings in the town of Plymouth that are in these districts that are over 35 feet high, I think you'll find that my barn, my brother's barn, the Italian farmhouse, the new barn on the Pemmy, and I think there's several others that are over 35 feet and are no longer conforming if you make these changes.
Rebecca,
Thank you. Yeah, I should add that the 35 feet is actually something that's standard across the entire zoning ordinance as it stands. So it's 35 feet no matter where you are in the town of Plymouth as for a zoning standard. So.
Rebecca, do you mind if I say a few words just about conforming versus non-conforming lots?
Please, go ahead.
So I'm glad you brought that up, Bruce. You're certainly correct in that, increasing the minimum lot size may render more lots non-conforming. The goal of this is not to punish anyone with an existing home. And certainly, you're probably aware that any existing use is allowed to continue in the future. And that it's really only changes to existing uses that are that would be a challenge there. So certainly existing barns, just because a barn is over 35 feet high doesn't mean that it can't be continued to use as a barn. It just means that newer barns, if you were to propose a new barn that was over 35 feet, it might need a special exception. But that can be handled within the planning process.
Can I answer that?
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you for
Respond to that.
Sure.
I've lived here since, I was born here, and I've lived in this house that I'm in since 1963. And when you say that you can continue to do the stuff that you want to do, I'm in an agricultural zone. I've got property in the agricultural zone. I've had rights to have businesses in these buildings and everything else, and you keep changing the laws. And now if I want to change the use of my barn to maybe make it into a recreation facility, or if I have a house that is on a non-conforming lot and I want to add something to it, you folks, since you're making the changes now, might say that's all right, but 10 years down the road, you're going to have a whole new planning board, whole new zoning board. They're not going to know the history, and they're going to tell us that we can't do that with these buildings because they're on non-conforming lots, and you're taking away the value of our property by doing this. You've taken away the value of things that have been done in the past. So I think there needs to be serious consideration to this. It's fine to sit in town and think, well, we'd like to have this nice rural area outside, without understanding what the people in the agricultural zone deal with, how they operate, and what the restrictions you're putting on, what effect that's going to have on being able to maintain the land.
Thank you. I think that and maybe either Juliet or June can fill us in on this, but I mean, the zoning ordinance, we keep the records of what was permitted and when the changes happen, and there is a paper trail. So I think that, you know, if we're not, all the planning board members are not all still sitting here in 10 years, there is a record that is kept moving forward so that, you know, grandfathered is not just something that's anecdotal, it's actually something that is established as a matter of record. So
I don't mean stuff that's happening right now. All my properties that I have right now, I could put a business in there. I can, all the stuff that's permitted in the agricultural zone right now that you can end up restricting, or that are restricted, if you make it a non-conforming lot, people are going to look at it as a non-conforming lot and not allow me to do it.
Right.
And so it just, you need to look at what you're doing and what effect it's going to have on the people in the agricultural zone. If you want agriculture to continue and people to be able to maintain the open land and not develop it, you're going to have to watch what restrictions you put on it and what, you know, I might need to sell off an acre at some point to pay the taxes on this place if I don't have an income. And if you make it that I have to have, you know, excess restrictions on the size of the lot that I can sell off, then I may have to sell my whole place to some developer and let him develop it all.
Exactly.
So you have to look at what effect you're going to have on the agricultural zone people when you change these zoning ordinances.
okay, thank you. Is there somebody else who wishes to speak? David Kent.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've read through this. I would defer to the folks who live in these zones in terms of what they think ought to be the uses and the sizes and the rest and the like. They probably are more familiar. I live downtown, so therefore these things really don't apply to me that way. What does apply to me a little bit is I'm on the zoning board, and I do take difference with what's proposed, where you're taking out the special exceptions and putting in conditional use permits. The town really doesn't have innovative land use controls in place, which the conditional use permits are part of. That's one problem. And the second problem I have is the special exception has discrete criteria. You notify the neighbors, you worry about are the neighbors going to be hurt by this and so forth. There are criteria that people can judge and say, this is like a good idea, or this is perhaps not a good idea. It fits or it doesn't fit. Whereas a conditional use permit sort of is, which way is the wind blowing today? And I think people favor knowing what the rules are rather than having the rules up in the air and not discrete. So we've never had a problem with people looking for special exceptions. It's a relatively quick process. And I think it's a lot more fair, if you will, than something where someone can come in and the planning board says, no, we don't like that idea, particularly when there's no criteria. So that's my 2 cents. I'm not in favor of that part of what you're proposing. Thank you.
Steve, go ahead.
Just the point in the record that we already have a conditional use permit in town for accessory dwelling units, and it comes with standards that must be met. So it's intended to streamline their approval process, keep the applicant telling their story in front of one board for uses that right now are currently either special exception, as Mr. Kent said, or are having to go to the ZBA for an extra trip. So we already have this mechanism.
Well, excuse me, you may have it, but I've got the permit right in front of me, and it doesn't have any criteria listed. It just has a bunch of stuff that have been submitted to the committee. There are no rules and regulations stated in that permit.
All right. Dean Yetton, go ahead. Make sure to take yourself off mute there. We still don't have you there. There you
Hear
go.
me now?
Yep.
Yes, I just want to point out that over the years, the agricultural zone has functioned the best of any zone in town. We don't have a lot of problems out here. We're lucky on our farm down here that we do have the town sewer running down through, and we have a lot of clay, and that's a big point on down here. But you know, we don't plan on selling the land. We don't plan on doing anything with it. I think we proved all this 12 years ago with Kevin French's map, and as Mike Aaron said, 240 some odd people, and we proved what we want to do. We want to be left alone. We want to be able to function on our own, and I think we function better than any other zone in town. So, thank you.
Thank you. Henry Ahern.
Unmute me here. I also live in the agricultural zone. Most of you know I have a deer farm down here. I have also my rental units, which would become non-conforming. They're already non-conforming, but I did get a special exception for them because it's one group renting. I have buildings on my property that won't meet the setbacks, and I have fences that are where they're supposed to be, which is on the property line. When you start talking about increasing the setbacks of things, you're basically taking away my property. And that upsets me. And my feeling of this, that there wasn't any input into this from the people in the agricultural zone for all of the new zoning things. And I really feel that this whole thing should be tabled until we can have some face-to-face meetings where we can get together with the people that live here, work here, and have lived here for a lot of years. The farm that I'm on was my grandparents' farm. And we can sit down, and if you really feel you have to make changes, let's talk about the changes face-to-face in meetings. And so my suggestion with this whole thing would be to table it, postpone it, don't send it to the town warrant, and we can, over the next year when we get taken care of this COVID issue, we can go ahead with it. But I think the ag zone has been fine. It should stay the way it is. Thank you.
New comments from folks. Kevin French.
Hi, I got contacted by different people in the agricultural zone and a few of the things that I saw about it that bothered me were I don't really think increasing lot size arbitrarily is a very valuable planning tool, because it doesn't really allow the land to dictate what happens to it. And as Mike Ahern said earlier, a lot of times you want to convey as small a piece of property as is economically and practically feasible. And as technology and everything is increasing, we're able to better utilize smaller lots. And by increasing these lot size, all we've done, because I've seen this in every town that's done it, we've created a lot more sprawl. Because once you start chewing up the agricultural land with 3-acre sites, it's before too long, you've run out of agricultural land. And if you'll notice, everybody that has a lot, anybody that has a 3-acre lot can probably take care of about a 1/4 acre of it, because it's a lot of work to maintain that area. Once you take those 3-acre lots, pretty quick, you've lost the ability to use it as any agricultural land. And I've always felt the same way about the setbacks. I think they're counterintuitive to good development. If you look at the downtown area, for example, the way things were done historically before planning and zoning, which I refer to as the good old days, but when somebody would put their garage next to the boundary line, next to the neighbor's garage, and then they were allowed to use their entire backyard for recreation, gardening, things like that. And another question that I would have, the biggest question is, what problem are these ordinances solving? Because right now, particularly a lot of area on the highway or in the ag zones, Route 3A, Route 3, Tenny Mountain Highway, those areas are all governed by the state and access is determined by the state. And I've always been of the feeling that access is a lot more important than an arbitrary road frontage requirement. And if something can function and it's a good use on a half an acre of land with 100 feet of frontage and that works, that should be, I don't see where that is a problem. And I would really like to know what problems these are addressing, because they seem to be creating more problems than they're solving. And particularly the fact that the biggest concern is every time this comes up, it seems as though the people that own the property in this zone, most of them are not in favor of these changes. And as Dean said earlier, the agricultural zone has probably worked the best of all the zones in town over the years.
All right, thank you, Kevin. We just hit 3 minutes, so I'm gonna open it up for somebody else who has not spoken yet. Is there someone else here that would like to speak? I know there's some people, it looks like they've phoned in or don't have their screen on. You can pop yourself off mute if you're one of those folks that doesn't have video and would like to speak, and I will acknowledge you. All right, anybody new? Planning board members, if you see somebody that I am not noticing, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll go back to folks to give them the opportunity to speak again for another 3 minutes if they'd like. Okay, folks have already spoken. If you'd like to say something else, I see Dean, your hand's up, so why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I just want you to know that my folks came on this farm in 1927 and put it all together, and it's been held together all this time. I agree with Henry Ahern. When this COVID crap is over with, maybe we could have face-to-face meetings, and we should table it until we have, can all get together and discuss it besides something like this. Nothing wrong with this, but it doesn't seem to be working, and I would like to table it like Henry said. Thank you.
Mike Ahern, go ahead.
In my past role with the town as selectman, I was tasked with working on economic development. And I got together a small group of people and we did a report for the town that we brought back to them. And as I looked at other towns and started reading their economic development reports, it always started off with, the mill buildings that are on the farm and how it was a mill community. And I thought, we don't have these great big, huge brick buildings in our community. And I thought, and then it became so clear to me why agricultural zone is so important, because agriculture is our history. And the farming families have passed that down from generation to generation. And it may be from neighbor to neighbor, and then someone moves in, but we've taught those ideals. And so Plymouth has this heritage in agriculture, and that name that we apply to the agricultural zone means so much to the people that live in the ag zone. We don't want to lose that name. It's just so important to us. And it was important to the generation before when they met with the town back in the 80s and before that. And I also want to see this tabled for at least a year so the ag zone members can participate before we get to a public hearing. And also agricultural zone means something. It's not just something that's in Plymouth, but there are other communities all over the United States. And Henry brought this to my attention. There are groups called agricultural commissions. And we talked about forming a commission at one point, like the Conservation Commission in town, because it's that important. We didn't at the time. We felt the Ag Zone Committee was the way to go. We wish we could have, prior to COVID, maybe we would have caught wind of what was going on sooner. Nothing was done in secret. We don't believe that. We just really, now that we know and we're here, we'd like to be part of the process. Thank you.
Other comments from the public? David Kent?
Yeah, there's one of these I just don't understand. Maybe somebody can talk about it. It talked about current permitted uses will either stay the same or be allowed by a conditional use permit. Is it either or? I mean, where are we in this process? And Henry, did you really shoot that deer?
Are you looking at one of the summary sheets? I'm not sure what you're looking at.
I'm looking at amendment number 2.
Okay, the actual written amendment. Okay.
Rebecca, I think that's in the amendment. I think it's just because they were summarizing. The full record of it, David, is on the website. That kind of shows a side-by-side comparison.
Geez, I tried to pull it up, I couldn't get it up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because I think for some of the district changes, there were not many changes in use, but like with the agricultural district, there were more that were going to be conditional use permit. So Juliet may be able to correct me if I'm missing something, but I think that's why it was summarized that way.
My only other comment would be on the zoning board, we've met twice in the last year and a half. It's no problem getting to the zoning board and picking up a special exception if you meet the criteria. Thank you.
Yeah, David, that's the deer on the farm here. There's more in the background.
David, if I can mention, I appreciate your willingness to hear special exceptions on the ZBA. My experience has been generally that for somebody to seek a special exception or variance generally requires that they come to the planning board first, and then at least in the case, I'm sure you're familiar, a special exception doesn't require that, but a variance would. But either way, it requires tabling the meeting and then noticing, renoticing for a ZBA hearing and then coming back to the planning board. So, a conditional use permit can do in one meeting what takes 3 meetings in the process. So, it can stretch it out where the planning board could handle a conditional use permit in 1 month. It could stretch out to 3 on the short end if there's a ZBA hearing required.
Well, since you spoke to me, I'll respond.
I was hoping you would.
Yeah, I thought you might. It's generally, we've got a relatively fast process in terms of special exceptions. They've worked really well over the years. Very seldom denied, but when they are denied, the advantage is people show up to those meetings, they're noticed to the meetings, they've got a right to present why they think the idea is a good idea or a bad idea or meets the criteria or doesn't meet the criteria. We don't have criteria for what you're proposing here. It seems to be whatever the board seems to think is appropriate for that particular time. And I think it's good if people can look at that and say, well, it seems to meet the criteria. That's a good way to go. Or it doesn't meet the criteria. Maybe it shouldn't happen. It protects neighbors. It has a lot to do with what neighbors have to say. And I think it's good to allow neighbors to have a say in what's going to happen next to them. Thank you. I think I've said enough. Yeah.
Just one more thing on the special exception thing, because this is helpful feedback. So I want to thank you for bringing this to our attention, because in the end, if special exception is the preferable way to go, we don't have to use a conditional use permit, but conditional use permits are specific to the use. So for the accessory dwelling units, I went and looked in the zoning, there are 13 standards that have to be addressed, A through M. So that would be a lot less work for the planning board and for the staff if we don't have to create a conditional use permit. So if everybody were to agree that, I think that's something that could be discussed, and that's why we're having this hearing anyway. So thank you.
So I would also like to thank everyone who's offering feedback and you know, unfortunately, I'm sorry that this is the first that folks that are living in the ag district that have concerns that are here tonight is hearing about this. We've had several publicly noticed meetings where we've discussed this and we've solicited feedback. You know, this is a great place to provide feedback, and you know, I've heard some concerns about changes. Maybe this isn't the easiest place, but if anybody has suggestions on ways to improve what we've put forward, we would certainly be willing to entertain those tonight. This is, you know, part of the purpose of a hearing is for us to take feedback. We still have time to make revisions and put this forward for town meeting this year if that is the way that the board decides to move forward. Rebecca, I can't hear you. I'm not sure if anybody else can. I think it might be your mic. No.
Phil, you're gonna have to step in.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunately.
I think
I saw it.
Rhonda had her hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Rhonda.
Yes, I'm a resident in Plymouth, and a few generations back of family members. So Phil, I know that you're looking for some feedback. First, the way it's proposed, I don't agree. I think the ag zone should be left as is. I don't see the issue. I think Kevin French brought that up as, what's the point? What are you seeing the problem to be? And I think that if you could address everyone and share what the concerns are and why these changes, then maybe we can give you some positive feedback. But the way I see our ag zone's been going, I don't see an issue. And that's my 2 cents.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Steve, I wasn't here through the master plan process. Do you want to say any words about the goals of the master plan with relation to the ag zone, or Rebecca, now that you're here?
I can start, and I think it's worth taking a look at the actual master plan and not trusting just my memory. But basically, from the large meetings we had, the initial large meeting at the senior center, down to the topic-specific meetings around town over the course of a year or so, and then the survey, we heard a lot from people that they really wanted to see a focus on a density of development and new development in and around the village, out on Tenny Mountain Highway, but not in the agricultural zone. And I think there was a recognition that we've been fortunate as a town to have such great landowners like the many that are on here today that, you know, really do like the agricultural zone because it's rural and because they can have a couple of different business or a couple of different uses within their properties. And we've been fortunate because they're good stewards, and we've been fortunate because we've had a very low rate of growth, especially residential growth. But there's also concern that if that were to change, that any acre of land that could fit a well and a septic could get a well and a septic. So the planning board has to think long-term over decades. You know, how do we best guide land use change so that if something happens, we're prepared? And that's why we're here today. And that's also why we didn't take on all the districts. We really tried to balance out the mixed use commercial district on Tenny Mountain Highway with, which we heard a lot about, with also the agricultural district, which we also heard a lot about, and sounds like it should still be called the agricultural district.
The other thing that comes into play a little bit here is, you know, if someone had a, you know, for example, if someone had a 30-acre parcel and they were looking to put in, you know, 10 1-acre lots for some reason, you would think that it wouldn't be possible with a 3-acre minimum lot size, but with the cluster zoning and open space development that we have the ability to use, someone could still do 10 1-acre lots as long as they leave that 20 in open space. So you can still, even with a 3-acre minimum lot size in the ag zone, it would not prohibit someone from taking a parcel that was mixed terrain, where it might be, a small portion that's good for development and then a really hilly wet portion that they don't want to develop. You can still put 10 homes on 10 1-acre lots in an easily developable, nice place to live, and leave some of the less desirable land as open space for wildlife and other recreation. So, just because we're proposing changing from 1-acre lot size to 3-acre lot size doesn't mean that every new lot is going to be 3 acres minimum size.
Hell, are you changing it for?
Rebecca, are you back? Do you want to?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'll let you
All
take
right.
it.
Yeah. So the public hearing is still open. Are there further comments from folks that have joined us this evening? Go ahead, Mike Ahern.
Well, I just want, from what Phil said, and I get, it's a nice concept for people that, 3 acres sounds a lot better than 1 acre to a lot of people. But just realize, listening to what Kevin French said and Bruce, it's going to destroy the agricultural zone. And you take a small lot, and yeah, they only develop and put their house on a 1/4 acre. That's all they're developing. But then they have that rest 2.75 acres that goes into the farm field. They're controlling that. It's no longer the farmer. It will destroy the family farms. And so there are concerns that we have. There's many concerns. That's one of them. But it is, my grandmother always used to tell my dad, your land is your bank account. And, probably none of us will probably do that. And we'll use common sense. I wanted to sell a house lot across the street. My parents had built it in the 70s and 80s. We sold it with 5 acres. So just because it's 1 acre doesn't mean it, but in perfect circumstances, you may need that, especially the way that, and again, I know I've already said this, the small lots along Route 3 are small for a purpose. I hate to see everything change and then wreck that whole area the way that it's been set up.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that, Mike?
Yes.
So if we move forward with the gateway districts, and that would be that area along Route 3, Route 3A, and north out of town, would you feel more comfortable with the gateway district being a smaller lot size? As we've got it written, that's currently at 2. Would there be less concern if the gateway district was 1?
First of all, I would object to changing the agricultural zone name to anything else. It has such a meaning for this community. Agriculture saved the town. There was a period of bad times that the town of Plymouth went through. It was the farmers that came through, opened up their barns, and fed everybody in the community. And, this wasn't in our lifetimes. This is probably 2 or 3 lifetimes ago. This town is so unique, more than any other community with agriculture. And we have to honor that. We have to honor the people that came before us. And changing that name for just whatever reason, we've heard all these reasons over the past 20 years. We need to change the name of the ag zone. People don't know what it means. And well, let them come to a unique town like Plymouth and let them ask a couple of questions. That's why the planning board's here. That's why Jules and June is here, and they'll get the answers they want. And I heard Judge Kent say it was 6 or 7 years ago when we were talking about the Tenny Mountain highway assessment that they did. And Judge spoke up and he says, the one thing that we can do, you guys all have these wild ideas. The best thing that we could do for our community and for Tenny Mountain Highway is make things more clear cut, what is allowed and what's not allowed. And I wrote that down and I still have it written down. One of the few things that I wrote down, or actually a bunch of things, but that was the main one. And you look at what does Kevin, what is the zone that overlays Tenny Mountain Highway? The sensitive zone. You know, shortly after that sensitive zone was put in place, we had a laundromat and a car wash go in along the river just less than a couple hundred feet from the river. And it, you know, it's arbitrary on how you understand what that means. But then you apply a 500-foot setback to Lowe's. So they said, well, it's because of the sensitive zone. Well, what happened with the laundromat and the car wash that was allowed just a few feet from the river? Or so I think we're missing the mark on what our job should be. And I think Judge Kent said it right. Let's make things clear cut and maybe either modify the sensitive zone so people know exactly what it means. And rather than going into the agricultural zone, let's step back, look at Tenny Mountain Highway. Let's get some input. I don't know how many people on Tenny Mountain Highway, how many businesses you got feedback from, but I'm sure they would love clarity. And so I leave those two questions. How many people did you talk to from the ag zone or from Tenny Mountain Highway as you were working on this?
If you're asking that directly, we talked to as many people who would participate. We've reached out in a number of ways, letters to the editor, press releases, social media. I believe we put signs up in places, public access, and then not to mention our twice monthly meetings where we've invited the public participation. So that's who we've reached out to. And this has been a process over the course of 2 years where we've been reaching out in various ways. So, like I said, this is incredible. This is what we've been looking for all along, but we just haven't had much participation. So I'm really glad to see people here this evening. Steve Rand.
Hi, thanks, Rebecca. So Susan and I are probably the newest property owners in the ag zone. We bought the old Grange, and we bought the house next to it on Route 3 South. So in the process of working on the Grange, you know, I've become very, very aware, not that I shouldn't be, of our agricultural heritage, because the Grange is an organization that was based on serving agricultural families and farms all up and down the river, basically. And the lower interval, which is the land that the Aherns primarily own, which is that pristine column of land adjacent to the river, is in fact like our most amazing attribute in this town. Still pristine, still jewel. I think one of the reasons why the old timers built the Grange, for instance, that we own now in 1912 on 0.1 acres of land was because they knew they didn't need more than that. You know, they didn't really, they knew they needed to serve their farm community, and they didn't want to put it in the pristine land. So, you know, I think in some ways having a little bit concentration of buildings adjacent to the road allows the land behind it, which is the real agricultural land. That is the real agricultural land, is the bottom land, the original lower interval, which was the object of every one of our founding fathers, 1763 people who came here. They all got a certain dole of agricultural land down there. That was because agriculture is our heritage, and agriculture is really important. And I agree with keeping the ag zone name in there. I'd even change it to farm zone if it was up to me, because it is a heritage that we want to keep, and we need to maintain that point of that little point of recall of our past and the heritage that makes us the special community that we are, along with all the other pieces. And it's the specialness of our community that really makes us prideful in our community and allows people who live in the ag zone, among other places, to perhaps not follow their most immediate passion to turn their land into money, but to keep it there. So I think there's an ethic that we have to be careful with. And I think keeping the ag zone agricultural in name as well as in form is really important. Thanks.
Other comments from folks? All right. Well, if nobody else has anything else to say, I'm going to close the public hearing at 7:38 and then bring it back to the board. I'm not sure if our next applicant is here or not, but I guess we should maybe discuss any changes we want to see to the proposed zoning changes. So I want to bring this back to the board and just want to hear what board members have to say, any ideas, anything different that we want to see. We will be running another hearing for this 2 weeks from tonight on the 21st, where we'll introduce any changes that that we've determined are important after this evening. So comments from the board. Steve.
I guess more just a point of order. Maybe we could be informed by Juliet or June, but at the second hearing, the next hearing that's scheduled, can we still make changes? And if the board were to decide not to move forward to a vote in March, can that still happen, or are we locked in at the second meeting? I ask because I'm not sure.
That's a good question. June?
I don't know, but we can try to look it up. Unless, Jules, do you know, we talked about this briefly this afternoon and realized, yeah, let's work on that in the next few minutes here. We can, we'll see what we can find out.
Yeah, we were hoping that we would make the changes after the second hearing, because the second hearing is going to happen, right? Am I correct, Madam Chair?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
So second hearing will be on the 21st, and we are hoping that we would make all the changes after that second hearing at one time, so we don't have to renotice or think about noticing or.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't sure if we need to introduce changes like the second hearing, because the language from the state is something like if necessary, have a second hearing, and I wasn't sure if that's a way to introduce new changes to the proposed changes.
That's not my understanding, Madam Chair, is that the second hearing is only, in case you feel the matter is closed. So you don't need a second hearing. But then, yeah, so you would at the end of the 21st, the hearing on the 21st, you would finalize the language. After the public hearing, the planning board shall by vote determine the final form of the ordinance amendment or amendments to be presented to the town or village district, which ordinance or amendment may include editorial revisions and textual modifications resulting from the proceedings of that hearing. And then shortly after that, the language is due to the town clerk. So the matter would be closed
I just looked it up
for
and it looks
changes.
like, sorry, it's due at the town clerk February 1st.
February 1st, okay.
So the last day to hold a final public hearing would be Monday, February 1st. So really, that's why you're going for the 21st. It's January 21st.
Yeah, trying to schedule them on a regular meeting. So I'm seeing some hands up. I have closed the public hearing. I'm willing to reopen it if people have more to say, but I'd like you to try and keep your comments down to a minute, if that's possible. So Dean, you've had your hand up for a while, so if you want to go ahead and just, oh, I need to open it up again, don't I? 7:42, I'm opening the public hearing. Go ahead, Dean. You're on mute right now. Dean, oh, there you go.
You there?
Yep.
Just one quick question. Does anybody on the planning board own or live in the ag zone?
We all live in town.
I do.
Okay. Just curious. Why would you want to change it?
I think it's a fair question because we're charged with looking at all the zones in the town. So just like we're looking at the Tenny Mountain Highway zone where we also don't live, it's our responsibility to do it. But that's why we're trying to get feedback and direction from everyone. So we appreciate it.
Okay. Well, I think you've had good feedback tonight that it should be tabled at least a year.
Other new comments? Henry?
I just more of a question. If you decided that you were going to table this, at which meeting are you going to do that? If we table it and it's not going to happen, it's not going to end up as a warrant article, then there's really no sense of having the meeting, at least on the agricultural zone, for the 21st. Is that correct? Or do we have to have the meeting on the 21st and you'll get the same comments from most of us in the ag and probably we'll get some more there. But at what point can you decide that you're not going to change this ordinance and you're just going to table it?
We can decide tonight. We can decide on the 21st. I think that I would like to, and I defer to the rest of the board too, I would like to do a second hearing to invite more participation. All of you folks that are here this evening, we've certainly heard you and we're taking your comments. And we will certainly think and deliberate on them. You're welcome to make the same comments again in 2 weeks' time, but we will be opening the hearing up again in 2 weeks. So, Danny Downing.
At what point, so should you decide tonight not to table the matter for another year, and you decide to tweak in whatever way you decide to tweak them, the recommended changes to the agricultural zone, would those changes or would the draft of those changes be released prior to the meeting? How long prior to January 21st? And from what I'm hearing, January 21st would then be the last available or last time to offer up thoughts on those changes, correct?
Yeah, I don't know if we'll have any substantive changes this evening. The board still needs to talk about that, but we have to have the completed language in by February 1st to the town clerk, and at that point it goes to a public vote the day before town meeting.
That's completed changes entirely. Will this group and every other group have a chance to look at whatever draft proposal you come up with, if you come up with any changes prior to the January 21st meeting, as we had a chance to, well, I recently had a chance to look at the current proposal?
So we meet tonight and we meet on the 21st. We have no meetings in between, so I don't see, so we will talk about changes tonight, and if we come up with any changes this evening, we will make those changes and those will be available as soon as possible on the town's website. And then the same thing on the 21st. The 21st we'll have to make a final determination and vote on the final language, and that'll be available as soon as possible, but with us getting an eye towards making sure we're following state regulation. David Kent.
Just a little guidance, if you will. When I went to the website, all I found were the synopsis of the proposals. I didn't find the proposals themselves. Are they actually on the town website?
Yes, I believe they are there. If you go to town departments and hover over planning board, you'll see the proposed zoning changes right there.
Okay, Thank you.
Bruce Ahern.
I just want to add my 2 cents in as far as I think, especially the changes to the ag zone, it should be tabled until we can get together. Kevin French can bring his map. You folks can see what his map shows. We can explain the agricultural zone a lot better than you can on this computer, where we're not actually in close contact with other people. So as long as this COVID thing is going on, I think it should be tabled, so because people just aren't supposed to get together. And so my thought is to table it. Thank you.
Mike.
So
Ahern, go ahead.
with my 8 years of experience being on the planning board and a bunch of those years as chairman, when we got this type of feedback, unless it was something that needed to be done right then and there within a matter of weeks, we would table something like this when we got this type of feedback and take a step back and say, you know, rather than during a period of COVID, when we're running around door to door when we shouldn't be, to agricultural zone people that may not even have a computer, and knocking on doors to get them interested and aware of what's going on. I think it's best, and I don't think it's out of protocol to hold the vote tonight to say, hey, let's just take a year off. Let's invite the agricultural zone members to sit down with us and see if we can't come up with a good plan that everybody is in agreement with. So my thought of, I would love to see a vote tonight.
Steve Whitman.
All right, I want to differ with Mike because I already talked to Mike on the phone today, so he won't be surprised. I think the fact that we have this many people coming out, as you said, Mike, is wonderful for this initiative. My concern is how we keep you all engaged, and I recognize what Bruce just said about, I mean, the realities of COVID are making this much harder. But the reality is it probably will be summer or fall at best that we can meet in person. And as you know, we have to have all the stuff figured out by November, December. So we've been working often 3 meetings with subcommittee meetings, 3 meetings a month for 24 months, let's say. We just need everyone to commit to work with us initially on Zoom to work through some of these edits, because the feedback tonight is super helpful, even if it's not ideal setting. And then we can come in person, that would be helpful. I feel that we need to have the meeting on the 21st because I think word of this meeting will get out and maybe we'll have other perspectives that show up and maybe some of you will come back again. And if we can kind of build some energy and it becomes clear, the planning board may decide to delay and take the year, and we just need to keep everyone engaged. If everyone disappears and shows up next January, it's not fair to all the volunteers. So.
Other comments from the public before I close the public hearing? And at this point, I'm gonna shut down public comment until our next public hearing for an application. So so this is the end for public involvement right now. At 7:50, I'm gonna close the public hearing, bring it back to the board. Planning board members, are there changes that we want to see to the zoning ordinance, proposed changes that we've been working on that we're sure of this evening? That's question one, number one. Do we want to still hold the public hearing on the 21st and make a final determination on the zoning ordinance then? I'd love to hear from planning board members on that. Mary Ann.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should continue with the meeting on the 21st. Take all the feedback we've gotten from tonight and that date as well, and then make a decision. Do we, as Steve pointed out, really good point, I didn't think about that, but to keep everybody engaged over the next year if we do decide to table it but continue discussions. So I vote for, continuing the next meeting, continuing the next hearing.
Thanks, Marianne. I tend to agree. In my experience on the planning board, it seems like we get a lot of people to participate in situations like this when we're on a tight timeline. So if we can't get more commitment during the rest of the year, I'd love to see who else comes out and has some comments on these proposed changes as well. So, so please spread the word. Get us some more feedback. We'd love to hear it. Other planning board members.
I think there was some excellent concerns voiced tonight and some great ideas that were proposed. And I think those ought to be discussed, and the meeting on the 21st, I think it needs to be another session to discuss these changes to the zoning. I don't think it ought to be terminated tonight. I think it needs that meeting on the 21st.
Yeah, I agree with what Carl and Mary Ann said. I'd also just point out how wonderful it was to hear from so many people and hear the concerns that they brought up, a lot of which made sense to me for different reasons. I just think that there may be people that wanted to make it tonight that couldn't, but have the 21st circled on their calendar. So to now say that they can't partake in this conversation, I think would be not fair to them. So I think we should hold the meeting on the 21st and see who partakes, and then make a decision whether to move forward or to table the discussion.
Thanks, Mark. Also, I should point out that folks can submit written comments too. We'd be happy to get.
We're losing you again, Rebecca. We heard very little there.
I think I could read lips, actually, what she might have said, realizing it.
Can you hear me now?
Almost.
A little.
Yeah.
Take the papers away from your microphone if you have.
No.
Oh.
Mary Ann, do you want to take a crack at what she said? I didn't hear what she said.
Yeah, no, I don't think it was repeatable.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, Phil. I'm just kidding.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Rebecca, did you want to continue with this at this point, or close the public hearing until the 21st? Okay. We will have another public hearing on this topic on the 21st of January. Thank you all for your input on the proposed zoning changes, and we would look forward to further input again on the 21st if you have other concerns you'd like to share at that time.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I was trying to say that people could submit written comments as well. If they're unable or unwilling or uncomfortable dealing with this whole Zoom thing, then please submit some written comments, and we'll make sure that those are noted. So. All right. Thank you everyone for being here tonight. It's really great to see so many people that are interested in this. So thanks. All right. We have, has Mr. Carter been hanging in there? Oh, he's here. All right. Let's see. Going back to the agenda. June, do you mind if we skip to your introduction until after we go through the hearing with Mr. Carter here? Okay.
I just say quickly, before too many people drop off, because there are some people here that lost a few already, but I'll just quickly say I'm just this week started as planning and development director for the town, and as many of you know, I was town planner from 2000 to 2004, so I'm familiar with the town in many ways, but I have a lot to catch up on. So I can say more at the end, but I just wanted to say hello to people some friendly faces there that haven't seen me as much in a while. So you'll see more of me in the future. All right.
Thanks, Jen. We're glad to have you here. All right. Next up, we have a continuation from our December 17th meeting from Joseph Carter, site plan review to develop a 5.04 acre site on PID number 213-028-001. This parcel lies in the agricultural zone. Okay, so I I think we've already accepted this application as complete. We've had one public hearing. I think I might just open it up to a public hearing now and see if there's any comments from the public, and then address some issues in a planner report that we just got, and then talk about it as a board. Does that work for everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it is 7:57. I am lost without the gavel and opening up the public hearing. So 7:57. Are there any comments on the public about this application? Just giving it a second, since I think there's some folks that are either have their screens off or on mute. Okay, it looks like there are no public comments on this application. So it is still 7:57. I am closing the public hearing, bringing it back to the board. I think having June here as fresh eyes on this, we've been working on this project with the applicant for a number of months now. And I think the most recent planning report raised some issues that are important to consider. Comments, questions from the board on the planner report or this application? I'm trying to pull up the planner report. I can't see if anyone's got their hand up.
I'll jump in to fill the void, but I
Thank
think I've spoken enough tonight, so I'll keep it short. I really appreciate the level of detail that was put into the planner report. I also appreciate Mr. Carter's been really gracious with his time, meeting with us, visiting the site, taking input, and I missed the December meeting, so I looked at the minutes, and it appears that you all talked with Mr. Carter about a bunch of changes, some of which are reflected in the site plan, but it seems like there are a number of pivotal things that still need to be incorporated. So it looks like we're getting closer, but there's still work to be done for the site plan part.
Yes, I am trying to pull up the planner report, but I can't find it right now. So yeah, so I think there's some issues that were brought to our attention. Other comments from the board?
Has Mr. Carter seen this report?
Mr. Carter's on mute right now. Are you able to speak, Mr. Carter? Is it possible to?
Maybe he doesn't know he's up.
Oh. He has been waiting a while. We did make the decision to keep one person waiting instead of 20, so.
Let me see if I can. All
right, well, I'm gonna take this time and try and find the planner report so I can take a peek at it.
He just went off.
Check your email. I just sent you one.
Okay, thank you. I just had too many other things open. All right. Now I can see it in full screen. All right. So we don't currently have Mr. Carter on the line, so let's maybe just take a pause. How about we review the minutes from the 17th? Any corrections on the minutes from the 17th? Or perhaps a motion to approve them? Steve?
I swear I'll be the last time. I wasn't at the meeting, so I looked at the minutes pretty carefully.
Yeah.
Just a couple of an edit and a question.
Yeah.
It looks like on the first page, nope, on the second page, there's an S that showed up red. I don't know if it was.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
And then under zoning review, there was a reference in the second paragraph to Phil and I attending a selectmen's meeting, but that was some time ago, unless I have forgotten it, Phil.
I think the context of that was we were just trying to figure out what our next steps were and if we needed to do any more work with the select board. So we could amend those to say that, you know, you could even say some time ago that, you know, you two of you met to discuss the zoning ordinance changes and they were well received. But it was more thinking about, do we need to address the selectmen or again, but it was determined that we were good from the work that you had done a while ago. So
It was a historical reference.
yeah. Okay. Do you want more clarity in there or are you good with it as is? Okay.
Becca, can I?
Yep. Go ahead.
I was not at the December meeting, but in quickly looking it over, it looked like it said one version, at least, I'm not sure it was the most current one you guys saw, but for the Carter application, it said it was approved and it may probably say accepted. Can somebody just double check that? If you, I can't seem to find it in front of me either. So.
Okay.
It might be.
Yeah. Let's say that, let's change the motion to accept the site plan application as complete for the, right before the public hearing, public comments opened at 6:50.
That would be my recollection of what happened. Even if the minutes didn't reflect that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Thank you, June.
I know we had approved the subdivision previously, but not the site plan.
Right. And that was the November meeting, I believe. So. All right. So does someone want to make a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
I move that we approve the minutes as amended.
A second.
Okay, second for Marianne. I read the roll. Phil?
I'm going to abstain.
John?
Aye.
Marianne?
Aye.
Steve?
Abstain.
Carl?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And me, I'm aye. All right, so minutes are approved. Do we have Mr. Carter on the line now? Is that who that is?
Yes, that is Mr. Carter, and he's got to type in a number to unmute. What is it? Andrew, what is the number that he needs? Push.
It's on the town website, isn't it?
I think there's a certain number for not to connect, but to unmute yourself. You have to dial it. Andrew?
It should be *4.
*4. Okay, Mr. Carter, can you please press *4?
Scratch that. It's *6.
Okay, *6. I'm sorry. There.
There he is. Okay.
Oh, can you hear me now?
We've got you. Welcome. And thank you for sticking it
Wow.
out for so long.
Thank you. That *6 wasn't on here on the notice I received, but thank you anyway. I listened to your public hearing on your zoning, and I thought it was very interesting.
All right. So getting back to the question was, Mr. Carter, were you able to see the staff report that was written yesterday? Were you able to?
Yes, I received it, and I'd like to congratulate Miss Rowan. She did quite a job on it. She's very familiar with the RSAs, and I appreciated all the information I got.
All right. So it seems like there's still some more things that need to be addressed on your
Could
application.
I'd like to ask her, Ms. Rowan, if I could meet with you and go over all of the ones that you have concerns with, because I think I've handled about everything that I can without going through all of the different departments at the Division of Environmental Services. The concept is what I'm concerned with. It's going to cost me $4,000 to have all those expert engineers at DES review what I'm proposing and the design of different factors such as the water, the sewer, and I still got to. The well is going to be a problem. I've got to drill a well and make sure I can get good, adequate water. But if I don't have at least approval of the concept, I can't go forward. If I get spend the money and get all of the approval, and then you just say, well, we don't like it or we don't want it. It's not something we really would like to see. But I've been working with the former director for over a year on this, and a lot of those things that I've done were in accordance with what he thought was good planning, and I did too. What I really want to get across is that if it's developed for this use and to the contours and to the grades that I show, this property will be a benefit to the river and to the water table, because it's all because of what his thought was, and I didn't even think about it, was that the roadway should be conforming to the contours, so you don't have to do a lot of excavation, but you do have leaching because of there's an excellent sand system below. You will be recharging the groundwater rather than it running off into the river. And also you'll have more storage in the event of any flooding because of the leaching of the road. There's 900 feet of road that'll be leaching down into the sandy soil, which will eventually reach the groundwater. So there are some good points to it, and probably would relieve extra flooding. But I've got to go to these different departments with a plan so that we can discuss it and make it work. And they're all experts in their field. I was a town engineer and I was also a consultant to 3 planning boards. And we have a good general knowledge. We're like a general practitioner. But when you go to the DES and you meet with the different boards, they're experts in that. And that's what you're going to get when this is a finished plan.
So I want to make sure that Mr. Carter, I'm hearing you say that you want conceptual approval, and I think I said this at the last meeting. We don't do a conditional or conceptual approval. The approval you get from us is the approval. We can put some conditions on there, and often we do, that are pending any state and federal regulations. But what I'm understanding from this report is there's still some holes in the application that we need to have filled before we can really move forward.
Well, I'd like to discuss those and go over them with her. And I think some of them have been done. I went over this report, and quite a few things are done that she doesn't seem to think they're done. So maybe they're missing some of the information that I submitted. But I would like to take all my paperwork and sit down with her, go over what she wants me to do that I didn't do, or that she thinks I did do or I didn't do. And then come to another meeting and get a conditional approval so that I can go forward. I really can't go forward with any of these departments until I get at least a conditional approval.
So when we say conditional approval, it means that's the last, unless there's substantial changes that you're making to your application, you don't come back before the planning board. It's
Yeah, what I'm saying is that if I go before the board and say they don't like what I'm proposing and they want some changes made, I'd have to go back to you and then go back to them. It might change. Well, let's take the well radius. I'm going to drill a well there, try to drill a well, and if I don't get the sufficient water or water without a chemical in it, it's going to move. So I got to come back and change the plan and go back before you and then go back to them. In other words, I don't know if you can see my point. What I'm saying is it's going to cost me $4,000 with them to review this plan, all these specialty engineers. And they may see some changes. They may see something I didn't see and the planner didn't see. And they say, no, you can't do that. We won't approve it. I have to change it if I want to go forward. You could approve something that they won't approve. Then what do I do?
Is anyone else able to shine some light on it, this in a way that I'm not able to right now? I feel like I'm just not explaining the, I feel like, go ahead, June.
So, yeah, we talked briefly on the phone the other day with Mr. Carter, and I've spent a fair amount of time looking over the plans that were just submitted, I guess, on just received last week, I think it was, the 21st of December, sorry. In my review of it, I'm looking at this with a fresh eye because I haven't been involved in previous discussions. My report is to the planning board, and it is the planning board's decision of how you want to proceed on this. But in looking at our site plan review regulations and the submission requirements, and then just, trying to give some guidance beyond that too, of what the state would be requiring, and I always understand that there's this sort of chicken and the egg. Where do you go first? In the case of this particular lot, really because of this lot, there's a number of state issues there, I think, mainly being the shoreline protection area, some concerns because of the special flood hazard area. It's got both floodway and 100-year floodplain. Floodway usually has some additional restrictions that, yes, are administered locally, that floodway wasn't even designated on the map, but there's also going to be restrictions of probably what the state in that shoreline area will allow. So my thought is it would actually be more beneficial to Mr. Carter to first go to the state and at least have some conversations and understand their regulations in a way to see what they want to do. And, there's ways to get informational, from them in a preliminary sort of review. But, I think that there has to be a good look at this to determine, while it meets the zoning ordinance of the town, and I think that there's ways that this can fit our site plan requirements, the bigger question is, will the state allow this kind of alteration of, movement of fill and this type of use in that shoreline protection area? Can you get septic and well in a floodway and or floodplain? I mean, you think about a leach field that was going to get, potentially flooded at some point. I don't know what the state's design requirements on that. That's their regulations. That's something they need to check on. So as drawn, I see that there's enough, in this case for this lot, there's enough sort of state permitting that should have sort of an initial review. And then so the board, my suggestion, and bringing these things out is to alert the board that there's these things, and then you guys can decide, you want to give some kind of conditional approval.
I just lost you for some reason.
You faded out.
Hello?
There.
Yeah, I just lost you. Can I
I
speak
think
up or are
Rebecca
you
and I-
still speaking?
Is that working now?
Yeah, we got you now, June.
Yeah.
Rebecca and I,
I'd like to.
microphones are. So I just to try to finish up.
Are you through?
Let me just finish because what I was trying
I
to say.
keep losing you. I keep losing you. I'm sorry.
Let's
but
let
I'd like
June, Mr. Carter, let's let June finish. I think she's almost done. So if we can just let her finish, then we'll let you chime in.
Go ahead.
So I guess, again, as staff, we work for the town and we're trying to protect the town's interests and support the work of the planning board. So I just, this is, I'm happy to talk to Mr. Carter more. That's fine. But, I do think the board should consider what they want to do. It's your decision in terms of like, how do you want to proceed given these state laws for campgrounds, septic, water approvals that will need to be, water supply issues, the state laws about shoreline protection, that kind of thing. To see, because I think that there's potential for those permits to drastically change the location and the configuration of this proposal. So you could end up approving something that then the state, spatially changes, and then he would have to come back to the board anyway.
Mr. Carter, did you want to respond quickly, and then the board will have a discussion?
Could you repeat that, please? I couldn't make it out.
Did you want to respond to that quickly, and then the board will discuss what June said?
Could I respond to her, some of her comments? First of all, I have already been to them on a preliminary basis, and they wanted to know where I was in the process of, is this going to be the final design, and then we'll work on it. So I'm stuck between a hard rock. They don't want to review something that might not happen. I would be happy to know that the concept you can live with, or you want, or you don't want. If you don't want it, I just don't want to do it either. I'm a designer of septic systems. I'm a professional engineer with 50 years experience. I was a town engineer, and I was a consultant of Plymouth. And I want to work with the board, and I want to do this. And I think this design is probably the least resistant to any of your agriculture zone. There's no houses. It's a seasonal use, and I designed septic system. And this uses only 60 gallons per unit, rather than 120 for a house per person. The house with 2 bedrooms with. Did you read my report that I sent in today for the septic system?
I don't think none of us read the report for today. So I want to reiterate something that, our job isn't necessarily to want or not want something, or to like or not like what your application. Our job is to review how your application fits within our zoning regulations and the town standards that have been established. So, so we've gone through the concept, gone back and forth, and we've been lucky to work closely with you to try and shape the things that we would normally, want to see, but we're limited by the bounds of our own town regulations. So,
well, all of the suggestions and all the work that I've done on this was part with Brian, and I've done everything you've asked for. There's some other comments in here that about the sign. The sign shows the height and where it is on the plan, and you wanted more information on the sign. Yeah, I think I've addressed the sign. The septic system, I addressed all of it on that letter to you today that was delivered with the plan. And it's about as far as I can go with the septic system, other than saying, if you're going to change something, the septic system will change. If I get some assurance that the concept, and if it meets the zoning and meets your regulations, in other words, I don't want to spend a lot of money and a lot of time to find out in the end it isn't approved. I need some idea that you want this or you don't want it.
Mr. Carter,
as long as it meets all the zoning requirements, all the engineering requirements, and they will all be done by a registered professional engineer. I even hired other people so it wouldn't appear that I have a conflict of interest.
Phil, do you have something to add?
I did have a question. There were a couple notes in the report that suggested that a stormwater plan would be required, that the sewage and septic system would need to be designed by a New Hampshire licensed septic designer, and that I believe that the elevations, the plan would need to be stamped by a licensed engineer. Are you currently licensed in the state of New Hampshire to stamp these as an engineer, or would you be contracted?
I'm licensed. Yes, I'm a licensed professional engineer. And I'm a licensed designer of septic systems. I'm registered in three states, and my brother is a registered engineer, professional civil engineer, who is part of this.
Are you registered?
He'll be stamping it with me. I'll stamp it, and he'll stamp it.
Mr. Carter, are you registered as an engineer in New Hampshire?
Pardon? Yes, I'm registered in New Hampshire as a designer and a surveyor, and I'm registered in Massachusetts as a professional engineer. My brother is registered in New Hampshire as a registered professional engineer, civil and sanitary.
June?
But I wasn't going to have either one of us do the design. I was going to farm it out so there wouldn't be someone say, well, you have a vested interest, so how do we know this is right? But it's also going to be double checked. Everything that will be done will be double checked by the state, and they're professionals in each field. As a civil engineer, you're like a doctor that is a all-around doctor. In other words, we know a little bit about everything, but we're not specialists like the state is. The state is specialists.
Mr. Carter, I'm just gonna stop you there for a second. June, you had your hand up?
Pardon? Hello?
Can hear you, June. Oh, there you go.
In my review of just quickly looking up licensing in New Hampshire, I did not see current licensing for some of the people's names that were engaged with this plan. So I think that's another, that's one reason I brought that up. If they can produce current licenses, that give an expiration date that's in the future, then that would be great.
I will have other people do the plan. I'll contract it out. If you're not happy with, I'm retired, because you probably know my age, and I'm retired. I sold my business 20 years ago, and I remember I'm retired, but I'm still an engineer, professional engineer. But I'm not stamping the plans. I said I've hired already a wetland scientist. I hired a surveyor. I'm a licensed surveyor. And what you see on that plan is, the only thing I've done on that plan is the conceptual design. And all the rest they're going to be going to experts to do.
All right, so I think what we have here is the board is I think that, we're not usually just approving, and we've already gone through the conceptual design. So this is, our formal approval process. I think what would be helpful for me to move forward is know what permits are necessary. June, you outlined these, but what permits are required and what's the progress on each of those. That might be helpful because if we were to approve this, we would need to, usually we're saying, in all required federal, state, and local permits. I think it might be helpful to see those permits bulleted out. I'm just looking at your, I think, but I think there are a number of questions still out there. So the exterior, the design of the buildings.
That comes under, that comes under a building permit. They asked me if I would give them a floor plan, and I did. We drew
I think
out a
the
floor
elevation
plan.
is actually, we probably shouldn't have, I think our site plan review checklist actually does have the elevation requirement with the exterior on, so it actually should have been something we looked at when we were looking at the completeness of the application. So
you already have that. If you want another copy of it, I'll give it to you. It shows the elevation, shows the rooms, shows the size, and it shows the elevation in relation to it's above the flood hazard, 100-year flood hazard.
it looks like we need the details about the exterior design and the materials as well.
The material comes under the building permit.
Our site plan regulations state otherwise.
You could approve the exterior or the interior, but you're not a building. They're not a building inspector. The building inspector has to issue a building permit. You could approve something that he wouldn't approve, but it would go before a licensed designer or architect would submit a complete plan with everything and specifications, but it goes to the building inspector to get a permit.
Steve?
Okay, it seems like we're going in circles. I know Mr. Carter's worked in a lot of other towns, but we have to follow the Plymouth, New Hampshire regulations. And I think we have a significant amount of detail that he's provided to give the concept. But it sounds like, from what I'm hearing from June, he should probably go and meet with DES on the items in the memo to get clear direction before he has his hired engineer draw everything up and then come back to us. Does that make sense?
It does to me.
Sorry, what was that, Mr. Carter?
I'd like to review this with your new planning director and go through what items she thinks I don't have, and I may have them already. And what she wants me to provide, I will provide. So I'd like to have a meeting with her to go through item by item that she wants, and I'll provide it, come back to the planning board.
Yeah, and I'm happy to meet with Mr. Carter, but again, my report's there, so it doesn't change that you need septic approval in particular.
Oh, I know I need septic approval. You're going to have a complete design by a licensed designer.
We need a notice of approval from New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services.
So we've issued a lot of approvals in the past with a conditional, like they'll get with the condition that there's an approved septic system. But I still feel like there's a lot of unanswered questions right now that I don't feel comfortable going forward with an approval at this point. So
I agree. I mean, at this point, I think there's potential for significant site development that might be related to a stormwater management plan. I know that you've got a rough estimate of where you've got a detention pond, but we don't have any calculations to know if it's of sufficient size. My concern for you, Mr. Carter, is that we're going to give you an approval, and then you're not going to have enough information to move forward with your permits, and we're going to be back in this position of filing a new application and having a new hearing in the future. From my perspective, I'd like to issue as much information to you as we can, and I think we've done that, but I think if we need to, there may be things you need to change on the plan, and I would say that if you'd like to request an extension until you can get those items finalized with DES and make sure that you have a plan that you're happy with, I don't see a lot of advantage in us approving your plan at this point.
I wasn't asking for an approval. I'm sorry if you think I was. I was asking you if the concept, if everything passes through all of DES, is the concept something that you people want? Or do you...
So
it's not about if we want it. Matt, right. All we can do is decide if it meets our minimum requirements for site plan and zoning.
Okay. Is it possible to sit down and go through this with the planning director?
She's shaking her head yes. So that it sounds like you can connect with her and you can go through that list. But again, we're not going to tell you what we want and don't want, or what we like and don't like. That's really beyond. I mean, we all have our own opinions, but as a board, we hold the applications up to our zoning ordinance to make sure it fits all those standards. And that would be a good conversation to have with the planning director as well, to just pass that through as, making sure that you're fitting all of our zoning ordinance standards. But we're not going to issue an opinion on whether we want or like or don't want or don't like something. That's beyond our responsibility. So, or outside of it.
Mr. Carter, there were a few things that we discussed over time that you had mentioned were going to be, I think you mentioned that tenants who are going to have seasonal RVs on the spot were going to be required to remove them within 180 days. And that's a detail that actually needs to be specified and part of the plan. And as of now, I don't think we have a record of that on the plan. That's the type of thing that, would prohibit me from feeling comfortable approving this at this time.
Could I answer that? I was asked to provide a lease. I had the lawyer draw up a lease and submitted it to the board. And it states it very plainly what they can do and what they can't do. And there's a lot in there, and they can't be there. They're going to be less than 180 days. That's right in the lease. It has to be removed, or I can remove it and charge them to remove it. But I sent you a complete lease that I had a lawyer draw up.
But you can add a note to the plan that clearly defines.
I would certainly, I'll add it to the plan. But you wanted to see the lease first. That's what I understood.
We didn't specifically ask for a lease. We wanted a note of the requirement on the plan.
Oh, I don't have, there's no problem putting things on the plan. It's just that I understood from what I was told that you wanted to see a lease, a typical lease. And I did have a typical lease drawn up and I had it delivered, but I wouldn't put it on. I'll put everything on the plan. I don't have a problem putting things on the plan. I have a big problem going before the board, before all the board, that the DES, they're all experts at spending a lot of money and say, we don't think we want that many units, or we don't want this, or we don't want that. That puts me in an awful position.
Mm-hmm.
Steve?
Mr. Carter, I'll try this again. You've met with us to talk about the concept and through the changes of your concept, and we have all nodded and said it meets the spirit of the land use regulations, but now you're asking us to go into a very detailed approval process, and we're asking you to first talk with the state because we can't finish the approval process.
Okay, that's not a problem. I've talked with them before. I'll be back with them. I've designed them before.
Yeah,
and I've talked with them about this particular site. They said, is this what you're going to, this is it. And they also wanted to know what was going to happen on the other lot. So there'd be some connection for drainage.
Right. Yep. We want to help you. We're trying not to add more meetings for you, but we need you to go through that step with the state.
Thank you, Steve. All right, so logistically, we have until, so we accepted this application is complete on the 17th. We have 65 days, day one being the 18th. So my calculation, that's either the 20th or the 21st of February. We have a meeting on the 19th of February. That's our works or our public hearing day. So that's our last date to issue an opinion, unless we can mutually agree upon extending it further. So do we want to, I think we're gonna have another busy hearing 2 weeks from tonight. So we need to continue the public hearing to a future date. Do we want to continue it to the 21st, or do we want to push this back to the 19th of February? I would prefer the 19th of February, but I don't want to be holding this up unnecessarily. So I think we're going to have at least an hour and a half hearing, judging by today's reaction to the zoning ordinance. So, and we need to have some time to discuss that further too. So
I think it's the 18th of February, and I agree.
18th. Okay. Mr. Carter, does that work for you if we continue your application until the 18th of February?
I don't have a problem with that at all.
Okay. Great.
You were going to have a meeting the 21st. I thought that's a separate meeting. So you wanted the 18th? The date will be February 18th.
Yeah, I think so. We've got another zoning hearing on the 21st, and I think we're going to have we're going to be exhausted. So if you could wait until the 18th, I think that would give you a bit more time.
Yes, I'll go back to the state too.
Okay.
But could I also set up an appointment with the director?
I think it'd probably be better. Yeah, you can. I would contact her during business hours and connect with her then, and then set up an appointment.
I'm happy to talk to you. Probably we can set up a good phone call, time by phone to talk. That would be great.
Yeah, I would have liked to bring in all the information that I've compiled over the year and go over what she thinks I don't have and what I do. I know what you want, a definitive okay from the DES on all departments that are involved. I know that. I'll do that in the meantime, but I wanted to make sure there was something that she's looking for that I have already done. So if I had a list of what she's looking for that Or if she's not satisfied with what I submitted prior, I want to know that.
I think everything's pretty well detailed in the planner report that was that you received a day or two ago. So I would work off of that, and then I think discussing that with her at another time would probably be your best bet.
Okay.
All right. We will talk to you on the 18th of February.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we should probably have a motion to continue the public hearing to a date to February the 18th.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I'm going to read the roll. Phil?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Marianne?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Carl?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
An aye from me. Okay, thank you, everyone. Yeah, all right. So this has been a long evening. Do we want to discuss anything regarding the zoning ordinance before we sign off while stuff is still fresh in our head? What does everyone think?
Let's let June introduce herself.
Oh yeah, June.
I think I already did. I'll jump right in. I'm June Hammond Rowan. For those of you that don't know me, I'm glad to be here. This originally we wanted Kathy Lowe, the town manager, was going to come to this meeting, and Rebecca had been in touch with her about that. And I do want to say that I don't know if you noticed, Kathy was on the meeting earlier, and she texted me. She had a really important phone call that she had to address, so she had to go off. Otherwise, she would have probably hung out until the formal introduction that I guess is at this time. So, yeah, as I quickly said before, I've been planner in town before, but there's certainly a lot for me to catch up on, and just really got going this week. So it's been a busy week, and Juliet's been great helping me find my way around, even though I'm back in the same office that I was in before. So it's kind of, I say that, and I guess it's been fun to kind of re-engage in many ways, although there's a lot of changes to get involved with too and understand, and a lot of details of, when is the zoning amendments, what's the final deadline, that kind of thing. So, but yeah, I've been, since leaving Plymouth before, I mean, I guess for those of you that don't know me very well, I was really started my career as a planner up in Berlin in 1994. So I'm from there till about 2000, I was the city planner, and moved south to this area to be working in Plymouth for about 4 years or so. And then I worked for a little less than a year at the state planning office, Office of Energy and Planning at the time, as a water resources planner. And I did focus on a lot of floodplain development ordinances and things like that. So but again, there's been changes in those regulations and requirements. But so that's where I will have a little bit, and need to refamiliarize myself with flood maps and current standards for all of that. But then I went to Plymouth State for about the last almost 16 years, where I did a variety of things and have taught community planning, as Steve knows. And so maybe you've seen me walking around town with planning students in the last couple semesters here. And I've taught some other things too. So I really got motivated to come back in the last couple years, really been thinking about, as I've been talking about planning, I kind of realized I missed doing it. So here I am to help you guys along. So I do think, I certainly look forward to getting to know all of you better and working with you in new ways. And as we sort out in the next few months, I've already got some ideas of, things I'd like to see implemented or perhaps change, but there's always a lot to do. So I think maybe if we can work on keeping some work sessions to, obviously once the zoning amendment work is done, kind of preserving some work sessions, maybe initially to hear what you want me to work on, and Juliet too, and how we can better serve the planning board, the zoning board, and the whole town of Plymouth too, as we move ahead on things. That would be one suggestion maybe for the spring here, but we'll see how it goes in terms of business and applications.
I think it's great. It's the first time in a while we've had a single staff. Well, Juliet, you've been here for a bit, but we've been we've got two 2 staff members now dedicated to, land use stuff in the town of Plymouth. And I think that's fantastic. And I think we also have 2 very new board members and 3, Carl, I can't remember how long you've been around. Has it been more than a year?
No, it hasn't.
So we have 3 planning board members that have been around for less than a year. So I feel like, and all of us could use refreshers on various planning things. So I think we've got a good opportunity for us to shape up as a board as well. So I think it's pretty exciting. So we're glad you're here. You might not have this worked out yet, but June, are you going to be coming to meetings? Juliet, your initials and your names are very similarly shaped, so that's going to be interesting. But
we're actually gonna. Oops, sorry.
Go ahead.
Tend to jump in. Actually, Juliet and Brian Murphy and I are going to start really meeting next week to kind of iron out some things. But especially as long as we're in this format, Juliet obviously has been a huge resource tonight, helping. Before 6:30, she got this meeting started at 6. Was helping some. When we had that many people participating, helping a few people get connected. And then, we've texted a couple times and, so I think we'll work that out. And I don't want to burn anybody out, but we will share some duties here and build on our skills and strengths to help you guys, help the zoning board, help others, and any special meetings we need to have, and ultimately help the town of Plymouth. So
great. Thank you. All right. With that, zoning, we're getting on over 2 hours now, almost 2 and a quarter hours. Do folks have energy to think about zoning? Do we want to make any changes before next week, or do we want to just say we'll hear what other folks have to say on the proposal as we've presented it?
I have one thought. There was nothing that was recommended that was like a unanimous change. There was a lot of feedback and a lot of comments, and I know I have a couple pages of notes from things we heard. So I wonder if we create a list so we don't lose what we heard from everybody. Like the fact that they like it being called the agricultural zone, some of the questions that were raised, and at least bring that forward. Because I think at the next meeting, you're gonna have to explain the initiative all over again. Like, you're getting very good at it.
I don't know. I think I'm getting worse at it. I've done it too much at this point.
We might want to at least highlight some of the feedback from meeting 1.
Yeah. Okay.
But I don't feel like we have the time or enough feedback to go in and edit it. I think it's really going to be at the next meeting deciding if it should go forward with minor edits or if we're going to get everyone engaged in a year-long redrafting.
June?
I want to point out that, before I started, Juliet did work out with the town attorney. So the actual notice and the way the warrant would work out is 3 separate, I think it was 3 separate, whoops, I'm looking at Carter's site plan stuff, several sections. So there's also an opportunity for you guys to think about next meeting based on the feedback we got. There was a lot of focus about that sort of gateway districts on Route 3 and 3A. But you still have that one along Tenny Mountain Highway, to maybe try to solicit feedback on, Amendment 1, 2, and 3 and break it down that way.
Yep.
And even think about how we might get support for, because one part could go ahead and not the others, or 2 out of the 3 or whatever.
Yep.
So.
I like that idea. Yeah. Present it as the way we are presenting it to the town. And ask for feedback that way. So starting, because they kind of cascade into it one another. So starting with Tenny Mountain Highway, discussing Gateway, and then changes to the ag. So, yeah.
Go ahead,
John.
I was just going to say the one thing that there really seemed to be a certain level of consistent frustration with, and that we probably should be able to articulate very clearly, is the reasoning behind the lot size changes. That came up again and again and again, and I'm not certain that anyone was happy with the answers they received. And if we could articulate that like crystal clear, that would be probably helpful.
Okay. That's great.
Was there a reason when we were going through this initially that we went from 1 to 3 and not 1 to 2, or, I don't know how that was chosen. I will say that, in my development in the ag area, it would push all of the houses in this development into non-conforming, which again was one of the things that people pushed out. Most of these homes are 1.8, maybe there's one that's 2 acres. So something to consider. I don't know why that jump was from 1 to 3.
There's something to be said for density, and I think my understanding of the objection to the zoning size change seems to be primarily in the gateway zone, not the more rural areas of the ag zone that I'm thinking of. But I'm wondering if I think we could do 2 things. One is, rather than going 500 feet deep from for the gateway zone, we could go 300 feet deep and potentially ensnare less of that ag land, that the lower parcels of that agricultural land, so that they would stay more rural. Keeping in mind that our zoning basically says, when we get to that thing with lots in 2 districts, if there's a lot with 2 districts, it's only split if there's frontage on both. So if there's one lot that's really deep and there's no frontage on the back, it's really only gonna be treated like the road it has frontage on, or like the zone that it has frontage on. So, all those properties along Route 3, if they're fronted in the gateway district and they're not on a road in the back that's in the ag district, they're going to be treated as if they're a gateway district, which gets a little complicated. But we could pull it back to 300 to lessen the impact. But I don't think that message is going to ring well with the people who attended our hearing tonight.
Overall, I think our intention with the lot size was trying to find something. I think ultimately we might have liked to see larger lot sizes, especially in what we're calling the rural zone, that remaining agriculture zone. But we were worried that was going to be not very appealing to folks. So we were really trying to preserve open space and protect open space and not have lots of 1 acre lots. So, I mean,
yeah, I would agree. It came down to density, and where we want to encourage density, where there are where all the infrastructure is available, and we want to have a lower density in the areas that have more habitat, open space, working landscapes. 2-3 acres, it's still pretty suburban pattern, and I think that the attendees pointed that out. 1 acre is very suburban if you get a bunch of it. We just haven't had a lot of that. So it'll be interesting to see if other people show up on the 21st that feel the same as what we heard tonight, or have a different perspective that we haven't considered. And then, as June and others have said, maybe we'll decide that one needs more work. And we can find a way to engage everybody in helping us with that.
Yeah. But really,
is that the biggest concern as far as pushing it off, keeping people engaged? Is that the biggest concern, or is there something else? I mean, I know a lot of time and effort's been put into it, and I'd hate for that to happen. But just hearing all the feedback, do we have what's our concern about that?
About
pushing it off another year.
I mean, it is an incredible amount of work that we put into this.
Right.
It's 2 years of work, and so.
Marion, my concern is that we'd get to this point next year. If we put it off for a year and start this process over and solicit feedback, and we get to this point and we haven't received any feedback, it puts us in the same position where we're bringing something forward that we've worked on without feedback, and now putting it out for a public hearing. And that I think Steve's request was very poignant in asking that people that are concerned stay engaged and continue to contribute to the process.
If I can just say something about staying engaged, and I know it's difficult because we're like volunteering, we don't have a lot of like
Not
power
showing
to do
video.
this.
How do I get my
But sending out notices and such, it's a fairly passive form of engagement. And it's hard to really get people to respond to that as opposed to a more active form of engagement where you're really reaching out to people directly. And of course, that requires a lot of effort and time, which we may not have. But that I'm just putting that out there. I'm not sure we can really do that more
Right.
actively.
No, I agree. I think we were short of us getting on the phone and calling people or doing a mass noticing to property owners. I think we did the best we could reaching out to, it was a more passive outreach, but yeah. All right. So it sounds like we're going to put together a list of those things so we have something to sort of summarize the discussion next time. And so we will hopefully be able to streamline the discussion a little bit so that we can summarize what was talked about tonight and then open it up for new comments, ideally on the 21st. So, all right. That works for everybody?
Yep.
Okay. I am not inclined to open it up for public comment again, unless there's something else on the agenda. I do see that there's still some people hanging in there. If I don't like to squash voices though, so if folks have something to add that is not something they've already said this evening, that's not about something that's not about the zoning ordinance, since we've already closed that public hearing, I would open up for any other public comments. We've had the public hearing. I've opened up the public hearing twice for the zoning ordinance proposal, and we have another zoning ordinance hearing coming up in 2 weeks. So if you would like to make a comment about a general nature or something we have not spoken yet tonight, please go ahead, Henry Ahern.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, you've got a couple people now, Omar, Michael, me, my brother, who were on the ag committee before. So there's at least 3 names to reach out to, and from there we can get other people involved probably. But you were saying who to get hold of. Well, there's 3 of us.
We will ask you to sign your name in blood at the end of the next hearing then, to confirm your commitment to being involved.
Okay, that's all I had to say.
Thank you.
Hey, Grace.
Hey, Grace, go ahead.
Hey, sorry, I tuned in really late, but both Todd and I, and there are a number of people in our neighborhood, and we're all in the agricultural zone, who do definitely want to watch and listen to the comments that were made at the hearing, and because we want to become engaged for on the 21st. So I just wanted to throw that out there, and I really want to welcome June and thank the planning board for all the hard work they've done so far, and Juliet for keeping everybody on track.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Thank you, Grace. I think we also have, getting representation within that current agricultural zone, but it's not in what, along the state routes, the folks that are in the more residential areas of the ag zone. I think those are good voices to have as well. So glad to have you participate, Grace, and good to see you. So, all right, June.
I just was going to offer that I think Julia and I can at least make a draft of the list to help you with that zoning based on the comments tonight. So why don't we work on that for a few days and then send it around, just to offer some help to you guys on that. Okay. And then the only thing on the agenda, there was changes to bylaws too, but
geez. Yeah. Gosh. Do we have anything on the docket for the public hearing aside from the zoning for the 21st? Oh, thank goodness.
You may have a conceptual subdivision.
Oh yeah, this conceptual subdivision, yes. Okay. All right. So just real quick, we voted to change our bylaws I think it was last January, because we didn't have a quorum. We changed our bylaws, and it seems like maybe our previous bylaws and our current bylaws didn't quite follow the state regulations where we have to have the full board. A quorum is what is it? It has to be at least the half of the voting. I'm not even.
Simply a majority of members, isn't it?
Thank you. A majority of seated members. Thank you. That's the phrase I was trying to come up with. And right now, we have changed our bylaws to say a quorum is more than two, because we had to make a change because of issues we had with abutters and stuff like that. So we need to think about what our bylaws should say, and we need to make that change. It's pretty quick. We just need to read it in one meeting and then vote on it in the next, I think, and maybe open it up for a public hearing. So it's pretty quick to change our bylaws. I don't think I have the brain power to really think about it tonight, but either June or Juliet, are we able to just sort of get what they should say? And I think the changes we made last year never actually made it into a version of our bylaws. So we're kind of in bylaw limbo. So, which I almost said bylaw bingo. So that. Yeah, so let's maybe figure that out if we still have the bandwidth in January. Sorry, Jules, you had your hand up.
Nope, Madam Chair, I was just going to read the RSA. It's one line. I didn't know if you wanted to do that. It just says. I think all set.
Ahead, yeah.
Okay.
I think maybe let's just try and figure this out. I think right now we're operating in accordance to both the state statute and our bylaws, because we have more than two people, and we have a majority of our seated members. So I think we've been operating legally. I just think we need to bring our bylaws into accordance with what we should be doing legally. So I think we're in good shape. Let's just not forget to do this. And I'm exhausted. So if we could keep pushing this down the road, that would be wonderful. So.
Yeah, I think the challenge we had was that we had low members and a quorum was hard to get. So we I think we went the route of defining a number as opposed to just letting it be a majority. If I recall, I think that might have been my first meeting.
Yeah, we lost a couple members. We had an abutter, and then we had people, it was like a long continuation hearing. And so we had people that hadn't been participating. So it was just this complicated situation where we couldn't make a decision until we changed our bylaws. So yeah, so here we are still kind of scratching our heads about it, but all right. If someone wants me to stop babbling, they can make a motion.
Babble on. Move to adjourn.
Second.
I'm going to read the roll. Phil.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Marianne.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
Carl.
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
And aye from me.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Henry.